Did Vaush talk about the blowjob thing yet? You mean the thing with the landlord? Why is there so much discourse about this? Confession, I've been blowing my landlord instead of paying rent. So yeah, this has been going on since June 2020, during the pandemic when I lost my job. Started off as a monthly thing. Now I'm doing it every 2 weeks. Not exactly proud of myself, but TPH, I'm happy not paying rent, which is ridiculously high in London anyway. I feel like the answer on this, or the explanation for this, is so obvious. Obviously, it's bad. Clearly. Sexual exploitation taken as service rather than paying rent is bad. Some people have pointed out that, like, oh, would it be bad if she was a sex worker who had to give one blowjob a month and use that money to pay rent? And I guess the answer to that would be, well, rent is bad in the first place. But in that case, you're a worker who has some kind of autonomy over who you're giving head to. And that's like a job you've chosen to get into, as opposed to with the landlord, there's like a direct power relationship between you and the landlord. And then people would say, okay, well, people don't really choose to get into sex work. Like, not all of them, right? A lot of people choose to get into sex work in the same, like, Coconut Island sense. Like, you don't really have choice. So then it's like, okay, so isn't this just like skipping steps? In fact, some people have pointed out, giving 2 blowjobs a month to pay rent in London, that is a better rate than you will get for any, like, prostitution with any other group in any other circumstance. So in this case, it's actually like you're basically getting highly discounted. So then it's like, okay, so hold on. Wouldn't a lot of people prefer blowing their landlord to paying rent, like saving thousands of dollars a month? And I think the fact that anyone would ask or even answer that question is indicative of the source of the problem here, right? This is basically just the Coconut Island hypothetical all over again, isn't it? Except instead of it being there's only so and so many coconuts to eat on a desert island, it's you need to sleep somewhere and land is expensive and you live in London. So it's basically the same hypothetical, right? Now, the answer to the coconut hypothetical is to kill the person with the coconuts. I don't think that's necessarily applicable here because I think the long-standing social consequences of a Maoist-style revolution would probably cause more problems than it would solve, much as I'm in favor of the nationalization of land and the housing market. So, I don't know. I feel like the only, like, definitive, conclusive answer you can arrive at through this is just a reflection of the current state of affairs and how rough things are. You know what I mean? I also think it's worth pointing out the only reason this landlord is accepting this deal is because they like having power over the tenant. This is probably thousands of dollars per blowjob, like, money-wise. If the landlord just wanted to pay for blowjobs, he could get far more, likely better ones too, with less money. This is purely because he likes having power over the tenant. It's just a power thing for them, or maybe the tenant is uniquely beautiful, but I think it's far more likely that it's a power thing. Anyway, it's an altogether unfortunate situation. If a person has a choice in a given environment to choose between paying rent and sucking their landlord's dick, and they make the choice to do the dick sucking rather than paying rent with money, and that's a choice they deliberately take and conscientiously take, there's no way to take away the fact that there's an imbalanced power relationship between landlord and tenant, right? Because at any point, the landlord could go like, oh no, actually, it'll have to be 1 blowjob a day now. A landlord can't say, hey, I'm quadrupling your rent. At least they don't generally do it. That's not normally on the table, right? They can up the rent, but not like that. But they could quadruple the blowjobs. Like, there's a different dynamic there, and for that reason, it's a fundamentally, like, imbalanced thing. However, I do think that a person could say, like, hey, I suck my landlord's dick instead of paying rent, and I prefer that to spending $2,000 a month. Even though there's an imbalanced power dynamic, that's a choice I prefer. And I can't necessarily say that's, like, immoral for them to choose. I think it's immoral for the landlord to accept, obviously, and illegal in many cases. Even if accepting it from the landlord's perspective would make the life easier for the person who wants to do it. That's an ethically complicated situation, I'll admit. Not because this isn't sexual exploitation, it is. But I think the specifics of how to navigate the power imbalance from a person who's trying to do so in a consensual way from the tenant's perspective, I think that's complicated. I don't think things are complicated on the landlord's side at all. I think that's just bad. Okay, yeah. All right, I think that's all my thoughts on the subject. Would it be different if she was doing non-sexual labor? I mean, I do think that sex work is work, so no, I think it would be the same, right? If a landlord is like, "Hey, you can actually pay the rent by sucking my dick," or what if they said, "Hey, you can pay the rent by like doing a day's like hard labor, like cleaning out my garage or something like that." I still think that's because the whole point of keeping exchanges like this to a monetary level is that they are discrete and they are empirical and they are divisible and they're guided and regulated by laws concerning rent and like rent costs, right? There are no laws on like, okay, well, you can't up the sloppy toppy ratio. They just ban it altogether. But there are laws concerning like money exchanges. Also, the price that one pays for rent, like there's discrimination lawsuits you can file, right? If somebody like massively ups the rent but charges less for someone else or whatever, but none of this works if you're paying in blowjobs. There's no court that'll settle that, even if it was legal to do that to begin with, right? So I guess this is just like, yeah, I don't know. I think it has to do with like regularity and divisibility, but it's complicated. It's one of those things where it's easy to arrive at the correct answer intuitively, that this is wrong, but difficult to arrive at like a fully morally grounded, like here's every way in which and reason why it's wrong, I think. Vaush, okay, but then is there a difference between your rent is cleaning the garage and the rent is 1,500 and I pay you 1,500 for cleaning my garage? Well, there is a difference then, right? Because in that case, if the rent is cleaning the garage, you can't just pay 1,500. Whereas if the rent is 1,500, but they offer a side job of 1,500 to clean the garage, you could choose to accept or decline, and your rent is still being presented in a monetary, divisible, predictable format that you can engage with as normal rent, rather than just being a handyman for your landlord and having to just do like nebulous work to earn it, Because they could not make rent go 1,500 to 3,000 in 1 month, but they could say, oh yeah, to make rent this month, you're going to have to do twice as much work. That is something they could do. Vaush, just admit you don't know how to clean garages. Buddy, if you only knew how good I was at it. If you only knew. My grandparents over in Florida have a huge garage. And when I went over there when I was a kid, I would always help my grandpa arrange their gigantic, like ancient family house garage. The garage cleaning lobby hates Vaush. True.